many systems. We've had some talk about the sound level before, so let's see if that works as well. I've got this thing called voice meter. It's looking good, so I hope everybody can hear me clearly. And now the big question is, will people join me? Of course. I'm just going to check here, because I won't start talking if nobody is watching. It's a bit useless. And the systems are already really slow always. Yeah, echo. I gotta mute that. So that's much better. So how this starts is that I send out a lot of messages, and I guess Twitch sends out some messages as well. So those take a while to reach everybody, and then I have to wait actually for people to click on the messages. But I think I see our first person in the chat coming up. So that means we can start. Yeah, and where do we start? With me, because I'm the only thing stable about the stream, I guess. I stream pretty much every week about accessibility. And why do I do that? Because I am a web accessibility specialist, as they call it. I work at a large Dutch bank called ING. It's where I make their web components accessible, so I'm part of the design system team. And I want to share my knowledge and experience where possible, but also I would like to host other people and to see if I can answer questions and help people along, because I think accessibility is a noble goal, and it's even better if we do it together. And I started streaming recently, and I should say, I'm just going to open this tab on Twitter just for a second. Accessible streamers. Doesn't open like this. Okay. Twitter. Accessible stream. Accessible. See. I'm just going to drop this link in the chat because this one is important for me this week. On Twitch, you have this special thing called a Twitch team, which means you are a group of streamers that work together. And this week I joined the Accessible Streamers team. It's for streamers with a disability. I really hope we can move this platform forward. We can do this together. But one of the things that they use that I really want to check is Discord. Discord is being used a lot. Now, I'm not usually a Discord user. Discord is mainly used by gamers these days, and I think they are trying to change that, but still, it's mainly used by gamers. So I am now a Discord user, because a lot of Twitch streamers use Discord as well, and this team uses Discord as well. And as I say in my my stream description, if there are any barriers that you encounter as a viewer, I want to remove them where possible. So what I can do is check Discord and see if there are any big issues in the web client. I had a sneak peek this afternoon. I think there are some things that we could talk about, some things that they could improve. I'm not doing this to show how good or bad Discord is. I just want to make this like a teachable moment to share some experience. They do have this feedback form, and I'm just going to start fill this in. So this is this. Too many words. This is the Discord accessibility feedback form. This is our starting point for everything we do. And they ask, what platform do you use Discord on? Because they have several platforms. They have a desktop client, Android, iOS. I think a lot of people use this on mobile, but we are in the browser today. And if you check browser, please let us know which browser you use. Well, we're going to check in both Firefox and Chrome. And I'm going to show you why. So my left window is Firefox. I can make it slightly larger probably. Yeah. And the right window is Chrome. And I'm going to do Web Aim Screen Reader Survey. This is the newest. So WebAIM is this organization that keeps themselves busy with accessibility as well, web accessibility. As you can see maybe in the logo, web accessibility in mind. And we're going to go here to screen reader and browser combinations. So pretty much each year, it's not really that regular. The rhythm isn't as clean, but they very often check with screen reader users, like what kind of screen reader do you use and what browser do you use and how do you combine them? I mean, they ask a lot of questions, but this is the one we're looking at right now. I'm going to share this link in the chat. WebAIM asks people screen reader and browser combinations. Well, I'm on Windows right now, which is a learning experience as well because I'm used to Mac and using VoiceOver, but we're using Nvda. And when you look at this screen reader survey, you see Nvda and Firefox, and Nvda and Chrome. They are used by 19.6 and 18% of the respondents. Why is this? Well, some screen readers work better with some browsers. There are combinations that work better than others. For example, VoiceOver works best with Safari. So if you use a Mac, use Safari when testing. It can also work with Chrome, but it's made to work with Safari. So you will encounter the least bugs, the least issues when you use this combination. And there's a long story behind it. It has to do with accessibility APIs, about how some pieces of software don't work correctly together. But for the reason that both these platforms are really popular right now, I'm going to look at both a little bit. So back to the form, I said we're going to check with Firefox and Chrome because they're asking for the browser. So we're going to the next page. And on the next page, we get this question that not everybody likes. Do you use a screen reader to navigate Discord? This is a very personal and privacy sensitive question. Usually a screen reader does not announce itself to websites. I mean, a website has nothing, they have no reason to know if you are using a screen reader or not. It's none of their business, basically. It's private information. It could be medical information even. And well, if you're from Europe, you know how strict the laws can be these days. Medical information is a certain no-no. So yeah, I'm going to say yes today because I am using a screen reader. But it's really, really bad practice to make this a required question even in the form. You can even ask like, did you use a screen reader to test? Did you find any issues while using a screen reader? You can ask many questions, but do you use a screen reader to navigate Discord? Sounds like what's your default way of navigating? Basically, are you visually or cognitively disabled? Which is a pretty heavy question. So if you answered yes to the question above, please let us know which screen reader you use. That's Nvda, as I said previously, and we're going to see if it works at Firefox and Chrome. What do you find difficult about using your screen reader with Discord right now? Well, I'm glad that's not a required question because we haven't even started yet. I'm going to just say next. Are there parts of Discord you find hard to see? This could be because of contrast, color, or size. Are there parts? Well, I'm going to assume there are parts that I will find hard to see because that's pretty basic. Many websites do have issues with either color contrast or images. They even asked me if I used a screen reader, and then they ask if it's hard to see. It's quite a strange question. I'm just gonna say yes, and then I have to answer why. I'm not gonna answer why because we don't know yet. But I'm gonna assume we're gonna find something, and it's just really typical questions. But it's the accessibility feedback form. This is the official route. I prefer to test products that are open source. And then you can't just look at the issue, but you can also fix it, which feels really good to me. But yeah, they are using this form, so they're going to fix it themselves. Now I have the subject of motion. Do you use something other than a mouse, trackpad, keyboard, or your finger on a mobile device to interact with Discord? E.g. a trackball, voice commands, or a head wand? Again, really personal questions. I really don't know what they need this information for. They should just make a website that's accessible to all. These numbers should be of no interest to them. They don't need statistics on this. You don't want to include you want to include everybody and exclude nobody. So strange. If you answered yes, no. Do you strongly prefer to use a keyboard to navigate Discord on your computer or tablet? Yes, I do prefer a keyboard. It's a required question. Again, I don't know why. But yes, I do like to use a keyboard. Not because of a disability, because if you are a power user, it's really handy sometimes to use tab to go to a next field, or tab to go to a button, or use a key combination to open something. There are many reasons to do so. If you answered yes, why do you have that preference, and what could Discord do to make the navigation easier? I don't know yet. I'm not going to answer. I hope there's a generic ending to this form, because otherwise this is going to be complicated. Do you find parts of Discord overly distracting? Well, I know from some experience that they have moving images. So I'm just going to say yes and moving images. But again, a required question. Why? They could just make this an open feedback form. Does it take excess effort to understand parts of Discord? Yes. But I'm not going to fill everything right now. If your concern isn't covered above, please type a short answer letting us know 1. Which feature or part of the app is causing you issue, and 2. What specific concerns you have with it. Okay, that's good. Then what is your username? Very relevant apparently. So they can link your private information to a username. What is your user ID? Here's a link to guide you through the process. So on the last page you find a guide, but it's for the process of finding your ID. Okay. Lastly, we have a group of users that we proactively obtain accessibility feedback from within Discord. If you're interested in actively providing us feedback on accessibility concerns, please let us know here. Note, filling out this form does not guarantee access to the group. Well, I'm gonna say yes anyway, because hey, that's basically what we're doing now. Obtain accessibility feedback. Yeah, that would be nice. Maybe we can even contribute. But basically, here's a field with your answer. I also have things to say about this field, but that's a different subject. And we're gonna type some text, and I'm just gonna inspect it for a second to see if there's no max size to this. There's probably gonna be. That's so you see now the browser inspector, just to see if there's. Oh, move this away. Motor skills. So this is an input, and I'm just going to check if there's a max size. It doesn't appear to have a max size. Okay, so we can type whatever we want, but I'm going to prepare it in a different screen because, well, so I have this Sublime Text screen, because Sublime Text will be where we type the issues. Then we start, and then the big question is, what are you going to test? Because if I go, this browser, the left one is Firefox, it's logged in. If I go to discord.com, and I now click open Discord in your browser, it will open, and it will ask me to log in, because I do have a user account. So I could now test this front page. This front page is mainly a sales talk. I don't think it's the most important part of Discord or what people interact with a lot. So I think I'm going to spend my energy on something else. And I'm going to switch back to Chrome. See, it looks the same. And there I say open Discord in your browser. And it changes. Wow. So it's something rounded and it looks like a button, but it changes into an input and puts the focus on it as well. So there's this button, open Discord in your browser. I'm not logged in. I'm a new person to this, and I'm completely new. And I just say, open Discord. Yeah, I want to use Discord in my browser. Click. And it opens some sort of input field. And it puts the focus on the input field, and it has a placeholder. Does it disappear? Yes, it does disappear. And I just have to create a username and agree to terms of service and privacy policy. Yeah. And then there's this arrow next to it. So this is probably gonna be our first issue right away. my experience is, in general, if people try to combine functionalities within one element or object, if you want to do two things at the same time, you can usually assume that you're doing too many things at the same time. It never ends up in a good accessible experience. So I'm going to open up Nvda in a second. I need voice meter. This is for desktop sound. Let's see if I can. I changed the volume of Nvda since last time we used it. That was really useful. Yeah, that sounds much better. That sounds gentle. So I'm not an experienced Nvda user by far. I usually use VoiceOver on my Mac. So this is a good practice for me as well. I press tab.
Banner landmark navigation landmark.
Ooh, could be a bit louder than that.
Voice meter.
Yeah.
Download for Windows link.
Yeah. So the first one says download for Windows link. I could argue that it looks a little bit more like a button than a link, but that's not the best case we can make right here.
Open Discord in your browser button.
Open Discord in your browser button. So if you hear button, you expect some sort of action. You already think, hey, this is not going to navigate me. This is not going to open a new URL. I cannot bookmark this or open it in a new tab or whatever. It's going to perform some kind of action. I'm going to press enter.
Enter a username edit. Enter a username.
Enter a username edit. So it does pronounce that we are now in a input field, but it took our focus and put it into this into this input field. It doesn't announce that we changed anything in the page.
Banner landmark navigation enter a username edit.
So wherever I was before, it's now gone. The download for Windows link that we just had is gone. I still have the rest of the page. It didn't navigate in any way. Yeah, quiet please. I'm gonna press Control a lot because Control silences Nvda, and I think that's better for the stream if we keep it silent every now and then. But yeah, so first issue.
Voice meter untitled go to
okay, I'm already gonna shut down Nvda. We're gonna open it and close it a lot because
Nvda and untitled Nv exit what
okay, so I'm going to open and close Nvda a lot. I wish there was a way to pause a screen reader, but I think that's mainly a functionality that people testing things really want. Actual users probably don't want it as much as I do. But let's call this issue 1. When I go to discord.com/new, apparently we have a different URL. Discord.com/new. And use Nvda. No, it's not even just for Nvda. And use the open Discord in your browser button. The page changes content and puts the focus on an input. That's basically what we get. So that's the first issue. Changing the focus can confuse the user. So that's basically the first issue. I think that we find it. It sounds rather basic this way, but this is the core of what we want. Then the next thing is that it uses a placeholder. Why is that bad? Well, I'll show you. First, we're going to check the color contrast of the placeholder because that's also always a question. I'm using the color contrast analyzer. I've discussed it before. Do I need it right now? No, I can also inspect it and hopefully find the contrast value. So it says enter username. Oh wait, username we can often, it's a placeholder, so that's really hard to inspect on. So I'm gonna use my superior motor skills that I don't have to see if I can pick the color of the placeholder. It says 757575. That is a value of 4.6 to 1, so it passes. It passes the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guideline requirements for contrast, because it needs to be at least 4.5. So this is like a minimum pass, but for a placeholder, that's a good pass for the contrast. Still, I don't like placeholders, and I will type out why. The enter username input field uses a placeholder as a label. This means that the label disappears when it is most needed. That is, when a user is typing text. So that's not like a solid issue. It's not like if you check the content accessibility guidelines that you'll see, hey, placeholders not allowed. I mean, it's valid HTML, but it can be really confusing because let's say I have some cognitive issues, and we don't have to say, let's say I do, but they're not relevant for this one. So I want to name myself John. I see enter username John. Okay, looks pretty good. But then I start scrolling the page or doing something else. I could get a call. My kid could shout out my name. Anything could distract me, basically. It could be anything. Whatever you think of that often distracts you, think of it and assume that just happened. And I scroll back and I see, hey, I put John into this field. But what does this field do? Nobody knows. The label is gone. This is, my cursor is in there, so apparently I was typing, but what was I typing? I forgot. So at this point, I have no information. So as a user, I could like empty the field, I guess. I could empty the field and it comes back, or the other option is to refresh, and I probably lose everything that I put in. So that's basically why placeholders are really confusing for users sometimes. And it gets worse when the contrast is really bad. I mean, this is a pretty dark gray. That's the good part. Often placeholders have a rather light tint of gray, and it's also hard to read. And in this case, they also picked a really, really narrow font. So even though it's dark gray, it's still really narrow. And I can imagine if you use certain zoom tools, this might become an issue as well. So, and then if I press tab, I go to this button and I have read and agree. I have read and agree, not agreed. I've read and agree. Okay, so I'm just gonna listen for a second how that sounds with Nvda.
Discord your place to JN.
So we say John.
Submit button.
So submit button.
Button.
That's interesting.
Submit button.
So the arrow button, that's a submit. It doesn't have a visual label, but still it's a submit button. So for a screen reader user, for example, it's clear, but visually it's, I don't know. I don't often see arrows to submit something. If you now have like this top list of 10 big websites that do use an arrow to submit something, please share, but I have never seen it. And when I press tab, it says button. That's
submit button.
First of all, it's not a button. It's a checkbox. Second of all, it has a label, or should have a label. It says, I have read and agreed.
And agree to Discords. I have terms of service and privacy policy.
Exactly what the screen reader says. So there's a text beside it, and it's not being read in any way. It's not related. It's not associated in the code with the actual checkbox. If you look at the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there's a guideline called Name, Role, and Value. And the short version of it is if there's an interactive element, and the checkbox certainly is an interactive element. We just went to the checkbox with a tab. It should have a name, a role, and a value. Well, we already heard the role. The role was button, but it should have been a checkbox. So that was already an issue. But it didn't have a name.
Submit button.
So I'm going back to the submit button, then back to the checkbox again, or basically forward.
Button.
Hey, welcome to the chat. And it says button, just button. It should mention something, but it doesn't.
Submit button.
So I'm going to try this in
Discord,
Firefox as well. Sorry for the noise.
Button. Discord busy.
Oh, that's one.
Help button link.
Discord. Let me check. Oh, I need to log out in this one. which is
Stables,
also
close
rather
button.
complicated, but I'm
Log out.
okay.
Discord L. H bookmark N. Collapsed.
Okay, so I've now the
community.
URL open in Firefox. Sorry for all the noise. The URL is now open in Firefox as well. I'm gonna press the same button. Open Discord in your browser.
Skyline open. Enter a username. Edit has autocomplete. Blank.
Enter a username. Edit has autocomplete blank.
J-O-A-N.
I'm gonna say John again. I'm gonna tab.
Submit button.
It also says submit button.
Button.
And then it says button again for the checkbox. So we have the same issue. At least we're consistent.
Next. Exit. Nvda.
Your sound is a bit soft. Well, I should be less soft now. Thanks for letting me know. I'm still getting used a bit to audio and all these sliders that I have, and maybe then I have to raise the volume of the screen reader as well. I hope this should be better. So we just checked this checkbox with the screen reader in two browsers. It sounded not what it should sound like. So now I'm gonna enlarge this a bit. I'm gonna inspect it. I'm using Firefox for this. I usually use Firefox. And what do they have? They have a checkbox there, but it's not visible. You might be able to see that it's grayed out, which usually means that it has something like display none on it. I'm just gonna, where does it go? To a separate window, because we're zoomed in so far, it's better to have it in a separate window. And indeed, it has display none. So there's a checkbox, but it has display none. Can I remove the computer tab? Yeah, I can move to the side. Okay, so there's this checkbox. It's in the code. Yes, I'm testing with Nvda, and I have both. Let me just repeat it for a second so you don't miss anything. We have the sign up page of Discord. I test it with Nvda. I'm testing it to the left in Firefox, to the right in Chrome. And we have this checkbox that's visually clearly a checkbox that's announced as button. So it has the wrong role and it has no name whatsoever, which is really confusing. Then there's, here we see it. This is probably the element that we actually focus on. There is a div element. And a div together with a span is probably the most generic element you can use in HTML. And you should only use it for generic things. But this div element has an attribute called Tabindex, and it's set to 0. That basically means you can use your tab key to access this div. But a div in itself is nothing. So that's a really interesting choice. They could have used the checkbox, it's even there in the code, but instead they put a div around it. And it has a tab index so you can reach it, and it has the role of button. So somebody applied ARIA, even though the first rule of ARIA is that you basically should not use it. So if you don't need it, you shouldn't use it. And they have this checkbox, so they don't need it, but still they put a div around it and put role button on it. That's very unnecessary. So I'm gonna check. You can activate it with space. That's one thing. And also with the enter key. I'm not sure in this case if that would be logical. There is a form around it, which is also really strange. So they have, oh no, the form is around the input and the button, but not the checkbox. And then the button has a title element. Wow, there's a lot happening here. So this is the fun of web accessibility. Sometimes you think this is a simple page. You have a heading, you have a paragraph of text, and you have this text field that you can submit with a single checkbox. And what do you see? I have this third issue, and I just don't know even where to start on describing this, because there's so much happening. I think I'm just going to focus on the checkbox. I think I'm going to focus on the checkbox because you have to use that to agree to terms of service and the privacy policy, which is pretty much essential. You have to check it. It's required. Did they put a required on it? No, they put not a technically required. What happens if I don't? Oh, it gets validated. Rather strange. Okay, I'm gonna ignore the error messages as well. But technically this is required. You know, you cannot not agree to terms of service or privacy policy. So this is a really important checkbox. Everybody should check this before they enter the website. But if you are visually disabled or you have a cognitive disability or for whatever reason you use, for example, a screen reader or whatever assistive technology that requires you to get the name, the role, and the value, you're going to have an issue here. So we're going to call this issue 3, I guess. And we're going to put this all in the feedback form later. So we have issue 3. On discord.com/new, there is a text, we called it an input field before. There's an input field that requires a checkbox to be checked. This acknowledges that you've read and agreed to the terms of service and privacy policy. That's basically what we're doing here. So that's the thing. The checkbox is not an actual typos checkbox, but a div, and I'm going to put brackets on that so people know it's an HTML element. A div with a top index and a button role. Yeah. So that's basically what we have. So what is the issue with this? What is the issue? In WCAG, I'm just going to add the quick ref. It's always nice to get the quick reference out there, especially if you make no typos. So I'm just going to add one, just so they have a starting point. It might not be the best one to add, but if you add nothing, they don't know where to start. So I'm going to add, in WCAG, there is a success criterion called name, role, value. It states that an interactive element. I make lots of typos. I have a pretty new keyboard. It's really nice. It's a mechanical keyboard, but it takes some getting used to. So it states that an interactive element should have a name, role, and value. No surprises there. The role of this value, this element, and then in brackets the checkbox dash div, the checkbox div, that's basically what it is incorrect. It should be a checkbox and not a button. And then it has no name. While it should mention that it is for submitting what should it mention? It has no name. Well, it should mention that by checking this, you agree to the terms and the policy. I think that's basically. I mean, there's so many issues here. I could spend more time on this. I could test the error states and everything, but this is, I think, the basics of what we run into here. So let's just call it issue 3. I'm not gonna say we're gonna be how do you call it, exhaustive. We're not gonna find everything there is to find, but there will be some issues, and we're just gonna grab what we run into. Okay, so I'm going back to Chrome. I'm gonna say I have read and agreed. And I'm just going to press the button and submit. And it's probably going to say, too many users have this username. Please try another. There's also an error message that's probably not connected to the input field. It's visually connected, like there's this sort of arrow thing. People probably like it. There was a visual designer that said, hey, look at this. We made this arrow, so it's clear that it's connected. But in the code, this is probably not connected. That's something you see often with forms, that errors, suggestions, whatever feedback you get, it's not connected in the code. And that's WCAG 1.3.1. So I'm just going to say test John. Test John, that's a great name too. I might use that some other time as well. So we're going to try it again. This button starts doing things. And now I have to enter my birthday. So this is interesting. Now I'm gonna fill in test John in Firefox as well. What does it say? You are being rate limited. Ha! It says you are being rate limited. Probably I've done too much already. Don't do testing. We'll keep you away. So we're gonna stick to Chrome for right now because we have no other option. I'm just gonna start Nvda again just to see how we can experience this code.
Keep our users safe.
Whoa. Yeah, you were a bit loud. Is this better?
Discord, Google Chrome.
Yeah. Okay. So what we see is this sort of modal. And I'm afraid it's not a modal because modals are often not actual modals. There's usually something wrong with them. But we see enter your birthday. To keep our users safe, we need to verify your age. We will only ask you for this once. And then there's something that looks like a link because it's blue. Why do I need to provide my birthday?
Why do I?
Yeah. And then there's something that looks like a label and it says date of birth and it's required. And I get 3 select boxes to pick the day, the month and the year. I think we have some contrast issues here. That's what I expect because I have a dark gray background and the text is not white but gray. The link text is also blue. Probably some contrast issues. And there's this big done. And when I hover over it with my mouse, it gives this little sign that I should not enter. Probably indicating that it's disabled in some way. Okay, so I'm going to select day first. I'm going to tab to the done button. Oh, this is already interesting. You hear this? So I'm now focused on the day select and it just says list. And I'm going to the month select and it says list. Year select, list.
Why do I need to provide my birthday?
Then it starts reading the link that we saw before.
List clickable. List. Why do I need to list clickable?
Okay, so we cannot even reach it. Well, if it's actually disabled, that's logical. I mean, if you have a disabled control, it should not be reachable by tab. But is it actually disabled? So I'm going to open the inspector in Chrome. I'm going to go to this submit button. It is disabled. Okay, so the button, although slightly unclear from just seeing it, is disabled. So it's logical that you cannot tab to it. Silence. But that's about it. So if you only use a keyboard, you might miss the fact that it's disabled, which is interesting. So there's this dialog. I'm just gonna select the heading. The heading is in H3. I don't know why you would pick that number. And I'm gonna look at the inputs. So we have these 3 things that look like a select. The first one is yes. I'm just gonna close Nvda again because we don't need it. We don't need the Nvda to inspect our code. I'm gonna separate the code inspector so we get some more space. This is all going rather slowly. Yeah, but it's working. Okay, so we have we see something that looks like a select. It looks a lot like a select, but in the code it's actually a div with a tab index like we had before, so we can put a tab focus on it, and it has the role of listbox. And there's nothing special about this select. I mean, it's styled a little bit, you know, it's like nice and dark gray, and it has this custom font probably. And the scroll bar is probably not the basic scroll bar, I don't know. I don't use Windows that much, but somebody built an entire select for things like these. And they did it wrong because it doesn't have a name. So what do we do here? I think we're just going to make another issue. We can also see in the code, by the way, that the date of birth that we can put in, it's this H5. So it's a heading called date of birth. Well, it should be a sort of label. This is the part that could have added a name to something, but it doesn't. So we jumped from an H3 to an H5. And that's only an issue if you are using WCAG AAA, which nobody does. But skipping a heading is probably not really good practice. So I'm not going to mark this down or anything. I mean, this is not what's going to block people right away. It's not the worst thing, I think. But if you want to improve everything and be an example, then this is something you would change. They also have this div that's a tab index here. What's this div then? Oh, but that's interesting. So, as I said earlier, I thought they had a... See, that's the fun of diving into the code. Yes, it's fun to dive into the code. I said that. It's fun to dive into the code of a web page. We thought you could tab to the list box, but it's actually much more... I was about to say sophisticated, but it's pretty much the opposite. It's more a mess. I have to talk about Tabindex just for a second, which is really nice because I'm currently making a Chrome extension which builds on this particular issue. Tabindex is an attribute that you can add in HTML. And you can give it several values. What you see here is mostly a tab index of 0. And 0 makes sure that you can tab to something. So if you have something that's not interactive by itself, you can make it interactive with JavaScript. But if you then want to go to this element with your keyboard, you still need to add a tab index. So you can add tab index 0. Basically, it makes it tabbable. It's often useful if you make things by your own and if you know how to use it. There's also making something, this is what they call tab focus also. You can also make it focusable for JavaScript. So let's say you have this really special element that you want to have the focus on, but you don't want people to focus on it with the keyboard. You just want your JavaScript to be able to focus on it. There are use cases for this as well. Sometimes this is with a skip link, for example. Different subject, but then you can add a tab index of -1. So 0 and -1, they have use cases. Then there's tab index 1 here and a tab index of 2. I don't see many use cases for a positive tab index. What it basically says, if you open this page and you press tab once, go to the element that has tab index 1. And then after that, you go to tab index 2, as long as there are numbers available. So in this case, 1 and 2 is possible. And then if you press tab after that, you go back to the normal tab index. So unless you add a positive tab index to all the elements on your page and keep this in check and constantly update it if you add or remove anything, it's probably going to be a mess. It's probably going to mean that if you press tab, it's going to jump all over the place. So general advice, try to avoid a positive tab index. And what they did here is put a positive tab index onto divs that do nothing at all. So you have tab index 1 and tab index 2 on divs. And they do contain the role is list box. But why? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just gonna listen to it again with Nvda to see where it goes.
Why do I need to provide my birth?
Why do I need to provide my birthday? That was the link.
List clickable.
List clickable. I have no idea what we're focused on. It has no name. Now I see a sort of blue outline at the first list. So I guess we're focused on the first list. I'm going to tab again. List. It just says list. I don't know what we're focused on. I'm happy enough that I can see it. It's the second select, I think, but from hearing it, I don't know. So we do it again.
List.
It's going to say list again, and now it has this outline on the third list box, the third select. Tab again.
Why do I need to provide my birthday?
We go back to the link somehow.
List clickable.
List clickable, day. So 1,
List.
2, 3, 4,
Why do I need to provide my
5.
List clickable.
I think we have 5 interactive
Why do
elements.
I need to provide list clickable. List clickable.
And with Shift Tab,
Address and search bar edit has autocomplete control.
I do Shift Tab. That usually goes to the previous interactive element. I'm no longer in the dialog. It's not modal.
View site information menu button secure. Dialog. List clickable. List
Now we're back in.
Document. Address and search bar edit has
Now I'm back at the top. I think they lost me somewhere.
Day. To keep menu
Okay.
submenu.
I'm now gonna
Link in.
okay. I'm gonna close Nvda again to keep it easy for you.
Exit.
So what I'm gonna do here is make an issue for using the tab index because I think that messes up everything. I could inspect this some more and see where all the issues are, but the tab index is gonna make a mess of everything. So then we see this link that they have. Well, the biggest issue I see in the first case is the color contrast, and it's not underlined. So I'm gonna pick its color very carefully with my superior motor skills once again. I think this is the color, and the background color is this gray. So it has a contrast ratio of 4.2 to 1. So let's say you have a visual disability, maybe you're colorblind, for example, and you look at this modal dialog, you see this gray text, and then there's this blue link. It's very well possible that you do not see that this is a link, because it could just be all gray for you, or all blue, or whatever your type of color vision is. So this is an issue. But not being able to use the dialog at all, also for keyboard users, I think is a bigger issue in this case. So I'm just going to go with that one. But also the link, really confusing. And then while we're at it, I'm just going to check the contrast for the normal text as well. Oh, and I get an agree in the chat. I'm happy about that. And the normal text has a contrast ratio of 4.8 to 1. That's more than 4.5 for normal text. So that should be good enough. Good enough. That's the key word here. And then I'm going to check these supposed list boxes really carefully. I'm picking the color from the D. No pun intended. And it has a contrast ratio of 2.7 to 1. We just talked about placeholders in the previous screen. This is pretty much like a placeholder. You have this dark gray text on an even darker gray background, and has a contrast ratio of 2.7 to 1. That's not sufficient for anything. What's in these selects is basically unreadable by anybody. It's way too dark. So I'm gonna go back to my little always too many windows, but that's just what you get when you expect. You have so many tools, so many things you want to do. I'm gonna create issue 4. The dialog titled Enter Your Birthday uses the tab index attribute multiple times. Some of these attributes are positives. Their value is more than 0. This influences the order of interactive elements for users with a keyboard. It can easily is not a word you should use too often, but this is really easily. I'm not going to use it a lot, but it can easily confuse these users and make the dialog unusable. Besides, there are also several contrast issues in this same model. So I think I've read that Discord has somebody responsible for accessibility. Feel free to look back at this and feel free to ask me anything, of course. But I also assume that they know how to find contrast issues. I'm just going to assume that. Just if they're going to fix things, I hope they check for contrast as well, just by mentioning it. So we have almost created our account. We have some people in the chat. Maybe there are any questions so far. Is there anything that stands out or that you, well, that shocks you maybe more than you wanted to? Any question at all at any point is welcome. Meanwhile, I'm going to fill in, it does work with arrow keys. I'm going to fill in a birth date. It does work with arrow keys. It does loop around. It does not work with home and end. It should. It does not work with page up and page down. It should. Escaping it does cancel selection, so that's good. And then space does select it. And some things they do right, some things they don't. But hey. So I'm just going to say I'm from the 1st of January 2001. I think a lot of users are born on that date. I'm just going to check the link for a sec. Where does it go? It opens in a new tab because that target blank. And then it goes to the support pages. I'm not going to look at the support pages. I'm going to get really confused if I'm going to check more pages than we're already checking. One thing I've learned from auditing is try to have a focus. When you look at the official guidelines of inspecting, they say to create a sample. So I'm going to check these pages for accessibility and nothing more than that. And I think that's a really good advice because it's so easy to get lost. When I see these things, I want to dive into these support pages. We just saw this like overview page. There's so many things happening here. I want to dive into everything. I see somebody asking, have you been active in accessibility for a long time? It's the 1st of June today, right? I'm going to double check. 2nd of June already. July. 2nd of July. Anybody notice that we have this virus going on that messes with your sense of date and time? I have been in accessibility for 4 years and a month then. I think I started on June the 1st in 2016. So 4 years. It feels really short because often if you look at job positions and they ask for a senior developer, they're not going to ask for a developer with 4 years of experience. But I've also been really focused on accessibility. A lot of people busy with accessibility, they are front-end developers or UXers or whatever role they have. They have a main role, and next to that, they get busy with accessibility. And I've been focused on accessibility pretty much as my sole subject for more than 4 years now. I've had some very good guidance, some people around me that know a lot, and I've met a lot of people. So for a long time, it never feels like I've been in accessibility for a long time. But I do feel by now that I can say I have some things to share. So, well, this is not the first stream, so I guess there's something of truth in there. I've not been at it for a long time, but I hope I have some things to share. And I hope you all agree, of course. I'm just going to enter this birthday now and see what's going to happen. I'm going to press the done button. It now gives a pointer. This is also really interesting for some people that care, of course. Usually if you're on a website and you have a link, so I'm going to show this in Firefox, you get this pointer. So you get a hand and it's going to stick out a finger and it's going to point to the link. That's what happens when you see a link. Why do they do this? Because a link does not have a lot of affordance. You cannot always recognize a link as easily. So they added this arrow, this handy thing to make sure that you see, hey, this is a link, this is something you can click. But the specifications also say that if you have a button should always be clear and interactive. So a button should not show this hand. So if I go to the top bar of my Firefox, it actually follows this pattern. You see it's a normal arrow. The cursor doesn't change, it's an arrow, because these are all buttons. But when I go to a link on Discord, it shows this hand. And what's now interesting that I have this enter your birthday, and the button shows a hand. So somebody somewhere within Discord said, hey, we're going to make a choice. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about this. I'm not going to solve this discussion. But somebody made a choice here. They have thought about things. So a button by default does not have this hand. Somebody added this hand and said, hey, we need hands on our button. But they also did it to the select. It also has a hand. I don't know why. And if this would have been a label, you would have been able to click it, but it's not a label. So, but it doesn't have a hand. So yeah, so I have a hand on the done button. It also has this little hover animation, which I find interesting because you focus on it and then the contrast gets less. It makes the contrast worse basically, but we're going to click done. So I'm test John now. It says create your first Discord server. So we get another modal. Can I skip this? I can just click X, right? So this is rather weird. So we have all these things that have that are interactive. So I can create my own, or I can start from a template like gaming, friends, study, artists and creators, clubs, and local community. This is all in the same modal. And it says create your first Discord server. But it also has an X. So basically there's a cancel. I guess this is not a required thing. I'm just gonna open the inspector once again just to see what kind of elements these are. I think we're just gonna skip this. We're not gonna. Can I? When does it work? I think it's active now. Oh wait, now I have. Okay, that's what you get with too many browsers. I had the Firefox inspector open. I'm so used to Firefox. I'm gonna inspect this div here, and this is the div set that says create your own. And well, if they are one thing, they are consistent. This what should be a button is actually a div with a tab index of 0 and the role of button. So it's not actually a button. And it probably doesn't have a name either. Does it? There's an image in there with no alt. Yeah, that's decorative. I can agree with that. But it's also a SVG. So this could cause issues within VoiceOver that I happen to know by experience, but we're not going into that right now. It says create my own, and it has another image that's also decorative. Okay, so instead of using a button, they have a div again with a role button and a tab index. And also for all the other elements, they have divs with roles and tab indexes. Somebody is spending a lot of time here on making buttons. I mean, if I want to give people advice when I audit something, for example, you have accessibility reasons. You know, the button that you create is probably not as good as the button that you already have. You can just use the HTML button element. But besides improving your user experience and adding something, you're probably wasting time. You could have used something else. If you want to appeal to a product owner or a manager or somebody, say, hey, you wasted time. That should trigger something. So I'm just going to inspect the X. You know, there's this X. It's also an SVG with no name or anything. Oh, this is the close button. It's going a bit slow. Oh, and then this is an actual button. So this is, in ways, a better example. I don't know why it's different. Maybe one team made the dialogue and another team made the content. But this is an actual button element. It has aria label, which says close, so it has an accessible name. It says type button because it's not a submit button. So this element is a button in itself. They used the appropriate element here. So somebody in this company does know how to do this. It's just not the team that actually made the content of the dialogue. And it says close. Okay, so this button says close. This is a button and it says close. It's really light gray when I do not focus it. Another contrast issue. Let's check it just to be sure. You know how easily I can get distracted. I could look at the entire code of this page and find so many things, but I'm gonna cancel this dialog. Its contrast ratio is 2.3 to 1. So this button, I can see it. I have pretty okay vision with my glasses on, but it's nearly invisible to many users. So I'm just gonna cancel. And then I have to claim my account. So this is where I have to enter an email address and I have to enter a password, and it looks a lot like the modal that we had in the first place. So that was, which issue was it? Issue 4, the enter your birthday. It looks a lot like that one. Claim your account. It has the same kind of title. It has the same kind of label for the input. It doesn't use placeholders, so that's a good thing. But it probably has the same issue with the label again. Oh, here it does have an actual input. So nobody made a div here. But they don't have a label. They just have this H5 next to it. Yeah, so if I'm going to go to this in Nvda, which we will do, it will probably say this is a text input, which it is, but it won't say what you can put in there, which is kind of essential if you're filling in something. Isn't there this old con man trick of giving somebody a blank paper and just sign something and you just add the rest of the content later? That's basically how this feels. You get a text field, you can enter something, but you have no idea what you're filling in. So I'm just going to start Nvda again.
Edit blank.
Edit blank. Well, that's not wrong. It's exactly what the code says.
Edit protected blank.
Edit protected blank. Yeah, it's protected. It's probably a password field. So we go back again.
Blank.
Edit blank. It tells me nothing. It has no name. I think we should make another issue of this. I'm not gonna make an issue for everything. That's gonna keep us busy for a really long time. But the dialog typos again. Dialog titled "Claim Your Account" has multiple. What did we call it before? We need to be consistent. Input fields. There is text close to it visually. It looks like a label. In the code, it is not a label, and it is not associated with the input field. This makes it that the input fields have no name. More typos. So the input field has no name. A solution could be to use the label element for the visual labels, comma, and associate them using the for attribute and an ID on the input fields. So that's the short version of this all. If this is any way unclear, I'm just going to explain it just to be sure. So basically what you see is really clear. You see this text and you see this input. You think, hey, email. So this input is probably for putting in your email. But in the code, they are in no way related to each other. You could use CSS to place this email label anywhere on the page. They are just visually close to each other because it has been designed that way, but it has not been coded that way. What you could do, and what is correct HTML, is put this email not in an H5, not in a heading like they did. You put the email in a label element, which is exactly meant for this. And just like we had a tab index before, you can also add a for attribute. Hello Marijn, good evening and thanks for joining us. We're just looking at a registration form of Discord, getting on our way. So we have this label element. It can have a for attribute, and inside the for attribute, you can put the ID of pretty much any element. So that's the identification. So you have this input. You give it an ID. Let's say email input or whatever you want to call it. And then at the label, you say for is email input, and then they're connected in the code. And then if I use, for example, a screen reader, you will also hear what the input is. And if you click, you will hear what the label is. And if you click the label, it will refer you to the input. So technically basic HTML. I shouldn't say that too much because it's a really easy way of claiming a lot of issues. But they could really use a label element here. That's the way you build a web page. So I'm just going to drag this one off screen for a second because I'm just going to put it in an email. I think we used Test John for this one. And I'm going to create a password for him. Claim account. Then it says confirmation. Okay. So I get this image with a confirmation link, and you're not going to see the password, I think. And now this is Discord. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger because apparently it's not responsive. Is it? You see, no, I'm just going to talk. I get a question in the chat. The labels were not labels. No, they were H5 elements. So visually, they did look like labels, but in the code, they were not labels. So that's a really easy thing to improve. I'm just going to make this bigger. See, I'm seeing all of this content that I did not see before. So if I put this on the half of my screen, and this is really a big issue by itself, I see this menu bar on the left, and I'm going to make sure I zoomed out. Yeah, I see this menu bar on the left. I see my friends bar, which is nice and empty because this is a new account just for testing. And I see the chat area here. And it's you get the idea. I see an interface, and here it goes to add friend. But when I go to full screen, there's this whole section to the right side that was not visual before. So if you are using a mobile phone, for example, or you are using a zoom tool, you are using something to zoom in on the page a lot, you're going to lose this. Here, it's gone. And it is an actual breakpoint. So I think they did this on purpose somehow. But you're missing something. So this page is basically not responsive. Yeah, said in chat. We also had buttons that weren't actually buttons. And we had buttons that were buttons. So some people know how to do things, and other people, they do things differently. Let's put it like that. So here we go. We've got this page, and when I zoom in past a certain level, we've got things that go off screen. Okay. I don't like that at all. Just going to see the inspector. What kind of area is that even? I don't know what could be here. I'm not an experienced Discord user. I don't play that many games. I'm not part of big communities for a long time. So I don't know what should be in here. But it's called the now playing column. In the code, it's called the now playing column. And the now playing scroller. Scroller is also very, very dirty. And it says active now. So I think, hidden true. Oh, I'm seeing so many things. So this is the part where we focus. So I think this is where you get a list of friends. It says when a friend starts an activity like playing a game or hanging out on voice, we'll show it here. But apparently if you zoom in enough, your friends don't matter. Okay, so I'm just going to say issue 6. When logged in and zoomed in. How much are we zoomed in? Can we see that here? Yeah, zooming deactivates friends. Zoomed people don't have friends. 150, 175. It's not even a lot. I mean, we're not even at double numbers here or anything. So this is 100%. This is 125 and 150, then 175. I mean, people can zoom in up to 400 or something. That's not strange. This, if you have a visual impairment, this could be the way you look at things. You're missing out on a lot more even. But the first issue already starts when zooming at 175. Wow. Lose, double O in this case, the right sidebar. It still shows when zoomed at 150%, but vanishes basically at 175% zoom. This means that some users might never see this sidebar. That should be enough, I guess. Nobody wants to lose content. At least that's what you think. Okay, I'm just going to put it like this. And how they handle it, I don't care. But you're losing content. And yeah, I don't have to hand them everything on a silver platter or anything. But I'm just going to say here, yes, count me in. This section could be better, yes. This section could be better, yes. I guess that's the whole message. It's quiet for now. Yeah, it's even quieter when you zoom in more. And now you also probably... it's kind of easy to understand why people in the accessibility field can get kind of cranky, because nothing ever works. There's also this need system-wide push-to-talk get the desktop app. So there's this bar on the top. I'm just going to inspect the bar just for a second to see what this is. There's so much to see right now. So there's this notice. It's a div with a section in it because, oh no, this is something else. Okay, so it's only this. This is the sidebar. So many divs. Just going to close this one. So it's this div. There's this div called notice default. And the first thing in there is the button that's to the right. So if I'm going to start with Nvda. No, I don't want you being typos all around. I just want Nvda. Okay, I'm going to start
Discord,
here.
Google Chrome.
Yeah,
Address
Discord,
and
Google
server.
Chrome. Tab.
Discord. Server sidebar navigation landmark clickable graphic visited link home. Clickable graphic button.
So home, that's probably the big icon. Yeah, here. It also says home on hover. Something else to say about that, but that
Clickable
tab.
explore public servers button graphic.
Explore public servers. I think that's the plus. Add a server. Yeah, that's probably the plus. I have no idea what these images mean. Tab again, nothing. Tab again, nothing. That was it. For somebody that uses their ears to listen to how a page reacts, there's not much to hear right here. So
Direct messages.
we heard a little bit. I'm just gonna,
Dialogue.
whoa.
Where would you like to go?
I click on something and I get a modal. Search for servers, channels, or DMs. Okay, so this is really strange. I click on this input field and I get a modal. That in itself is really, really strange, because basically I just focus an element. We do this all the time. You can go through a form multiple times before you fill it in. But I click on this, I focus, I get a modal. This is basically a whole different context. Especially if I have any visual impairments, I do not see the background right now. I just have this modal. And it has this really big input field with a very hard to read placeholder. And it has these arrows. They're like constantly moving. Very, very distracting. So if you cannot hear my voice right now, I'm just gonna put in the, this is gonna be an issue. Quiet Nvda. So you get this, I'm just gonna turn off Nvda already. Okay, so it launches a modal just by focusing something, which is bad enough because it takes you into this entirely different context. And then it starts to show these moving arrows. And these moving arrows, they are very distracting. I mean, if you have any issues focusing, this could be the point where you encounter these issues. This page will trigger those issues. After trying to use tab on the main page a few times, I click on, and I can still see what's in the background, find or start a conversation. That's what we did. After trying to use tab on the main page for a few times, I click on find or start a conversation. That's basically what I did. They have to find out how to replicate it exactly. I mean, Discord is a really big product. I can, if I did this in my own organization, I would expect follow-up questions. Like, what did you do? What was open? What was closed? They're going to ask me more, I hope. But sure, let's open a conversation. There's enough to say. I click on find or start a conversation. A modal opens on focus, which is really weird and distracting. I am in an entirely different context than before. And this is when I start to scroll off the screen. Entirely different context than before. As if that is not confusing enough, I see big animated arrows that distract me from the actual content. So this is not how I usually write issues. I mean, this is more a personal experience than a technical explanation of what just happened. But this is what we just had, right? Okay, so I'm going back. The arrows are still moving. And it says, search for servers, channels, or DMs. Where would you like to go? Okay. I'm just gonna start typing again. Only option after issue 7 is, typos. After issue 7 is to search. Now I'm gonna see if the chat knows this. So my only option here is to search. Can somebody tell me why this is an issue? Meanwhile, I'll open the quick reference again. I hope it also opens in this browser. Why is it an issue that searching is the only option? And this is an actual WCAG issue, at least in my opinion. I don't know if anybody disagrees, but does anybody know in the chat why would this be an option? I can only search. The only thing I can do on this website is search. If you say nothing, I'll show you anyway, so that's the easy part. For me, this clashes with WCAG 2.4.5, let's say better, multiple ways. And I will state what it says, enlarge it a bit as well. See, we can zoom much more than 175% here. It says more than one way is available to locate a web page within a set of web pages, except where the web page is the result of or a step in a process. So it's quite literally what it says in the title. You should be able to navigate in multiple ways. And I'm going back to the Discord again. I'm just going to try clicking next to it. Yeah, it closes. So I can still do different things. So if you're going to be really technical, you're probably still going to find different ways. But I mean, forcing a user to search is basically forcing them to use one way of navigation. And search, I think it's really popular, especially where do you want to go? Home. I'm just going to fill in home. And then it says can't find. Yeah. I'm going to look at the screen in a second. But the thing with search is, let's say you have dyslexia, or you have trouble typing, or cognitive issues that you don't have a clear mental map of whatever website. Hello, Rosita. Good evening as well. We're looking at Discord, as you might know already. They're basically forcing you to use search when you have dyslexia. It's really confronting when you make typing errors, but you have to type. You have to spell words. And if I'm wrong, where would you like to go? Help. I don't know. Support. I don't know. Learn more. Whatever I type, it's wrong. If you also make typos, everything you type is probably wrong. If you don't have a clear mental map of where you want to go, or you just want to explore the site, I mean, there's so many people for which search is not an option. I really, really prefer at least having a doormat for a lot of people. I'm just going to show the website of my employee, not because it's the best website, because it does have a doormat, at least partially. So having these links in the bottom of a web page, that's what we call a doormat, and you see them on a lot of big sites. I'm just going to try a Dutch news site. Hope they have it. Probably not. Oh yeah, they have it. Here you see all these categories. You see the front page, you see economics. Oh, I don't click it. Sorry for all the flashes. So at the bottom of their front page, you have all these categories that you can visit. If you don't know where you want to go, if you have no idea how this website works, this is how you find out. You can use a doormat. There's still a search function, but this is multiple ways. This is why you want multiple ways, because it can be really confronting to just have search. It's so limiting. Also for people that use voice search. I mean, okay, I'm just gonna make a sort of issue. Issue number 8. By now, my only option for after issue 7 is to search. This clashes with. So I'm not going to say it doesn't conform, because technically it can probably be conforming, because you can exit this, and confirmation is just a whole minefield that I usually don't dive into. Confirmation is when you do audits and you have these legal issues and everything, but usually when I work, people just listen to me, which is really a luxury. So I tell them something is probably not good to do, and they say, hey, Eric, sounds like a good idea. So if I tell them to not have a search field, they will probably listen. I don't have to tell them what WCAG issue is, what WCAG issue is related. So so I'm just going to show this as well. The people at Discord, I'll see what they do with it. Maybe they respond, maybe they do something with it, maybe they don't. I don't know. But this clashes with WCAG 2.4.5. Yeah. Multiple ways. I'm going to paste the link. By forcing a user to search, you how do we format this in a few lines? That's always the challenge with this. So there are a lot of things that clash here. Maybe in the understanding of the criterion. I'm just going to share this link as well if you want to see it. Quick reference is so easy. So here, even small. Every success criterion always starts with the intent. So to make it possible for users to locate content in a manner that best meets their way. Yeah, so we can just copy this. So it says the intent of this success criterion is to make it possible for users to locate content in a manner that best meets their needs. Users may find one technique easier or more comprehensible to use than another. Yeah, I think that basically covers it. I'm just going to copy this intent and make it easy for myself. By forcing a user to search, you make it possible for users. Oh no, wait. You make it impossible for users to locate content in a manner that best meets their needs. Users may find one technique easier or more comprehensible to use than another. For example, searching can be complicated for people with dyslexia. Many users enjoy having a doormat as a way to navigate the website. So again, I'm mostly spotting issues here. I'm not fixing them. It's not open source. I can't even fix them if I wanted to. But I think it's up to the Discord team to see what they actually do with an issue like this. So we go back once again. It says, where would you like to go? I don't even know what to type here. Profile? Profile. No, that doesn't work. Friends. It's a social platform. No. Channel. No. Add. Anything. Quick switcher. That's what we're in right now with pairs. Oh, see, I make typos as well. No. So I have a search for server channels or DMs. No. And now we see in the chat, as a Discord user, even I don't know what the purpose of that search option is. Yeah. You don't have to be a Discord user for that, I guess. It's just really confusing. I'm just going to press escape because that does close the modal and we go back to this. So we see the whole interface again. And I'm just going to pull up Nvda to experience what we just experienced before. So we're using the Nvda screen reader. This is assistive technology. This is a piece of software that reads the content of the page and makes us able to navigate it. And I use the tab key to navigate to interactive elements. That's a fast way to get a first impression, at least, when it works. And I use tab.
Surface Sidebar navigation landmark clickable home visited link graphic.
And it says there is a link to home, and that's this one. It doesn't have an outline, but it's there. And just before we could press tab again, that's not even happening right now. Oh, God. That's just it. Okay.
Friends.
I was clicking this to put the focus here, but so
friends.
Enter a username.
View site information menu button secure. Discord. Help button link.
Help button link. I think that's the one in the top here, top right. Help button link. I do shift tab, so I go back. Nothing more. Okay, so the issue we have here. I'm gonna close. Close Nvda again. There are two things happening here that I really would like to see otherwise. The first one is that I don't know where I am. I can tab, but I don't see where the focus is. So I'm just going back to this, let's say the wake quick reference. I press tab, and you see immediately that I want to point at it, but that doesn't work, does it? There's a contents link probably in the left top, and it gets a different shade. It gets darker and very contrasty. And I press tab again, and it goes to the next one. Tab again, and the next one. Tab again. That's your focus, your keyboard focus. And everywhere I go, it's very clear to see where the focus is. And when I go off screen, which I'm probably going to do now, it's going to scroll. And it's, again, going to show you where the keyboard focus is. That helps you to know where you are. It's like a basic requirement. Where am I? It's like the first question sometimes. But when I look at Discord, there is no keyboard focus. I see nothing. So I'm going to make an issue for this, because that's what we're going to... I think this is really blocking. When browsing... I see another question. Oh yeah, on an empty account, it has no function because no results will be available in any case. So the search option has no function because there's nothing. So there could be some instructions here saying, hey, you can only search for something if there is something for you to search. It also doesn't state that you should search for servers that are already in a list or something that you found before, or channels or whatever. If you're it could say search in the list that you have, or it's completely unclear what you're doing. I guess that's the core of it all. I'm just going to remove it. It bugs me. I'm going back to the issue. It bugs me too much. When browsing a page with the keyboard, typos, and the tab key, the keyboard focus is never indicated. This makes it very unclear what is focused, especially as many elements do not have a name. We've noticed this before with the inputs, they weren't labeled, so you can press tab and maybe you can hear where you are, but even that is not the case. So you cannot see it because there is no outline, but you also cannot hear it because there is no name. Most things have no name. So, and then I'm immediately going to make issue 10 because it's maybe a bit of a pet peeve, but there are many icons that I can click, but it is never, let's not be so absolute. It's hardly ever clear what the icon does before I either hover or click it. Adding a visual text to these icons to explain their function would improve the user experience. That's nice and broad. I should keep that. So basically, we just heard that the blue button left top is home, and when I hover it, it says home. So I guess this brings you home. Then there's this plus. The plus sign is used everywhere on the web. Nobody knows what it means, but here it is, add a server. Then there's this compass, I think. I'm pretty good at icons, but I have no idea what a compass should do. Does this bring up to the explore public servers? So add a server, public servers. Okay, so the compass is explore. And then there's download apps. So there's this big download button, because that's often what this downwards arrow means. And it's download apps. I have no idea what this is. This label that's floating next to it, which is also not correctly implemented, by the way. A tooltip should be selectable, but that's a different story. They could just put it under there. Just say home, add server, explore, public servers, download apps. They're pretty short descriptions. They could put it under there. Like here, they have this icon for friends, and they have the text friends next to it. Then you know, oh, that's what this icon means. So you still get the value of the icon. You can scan the page and you say, oh, there's this friend icon. And then you read the text and you can confirm it. So it helps you scan. But it also makes it clear what the icon actually is. Then there's direct messages and plus. So do you create a DM or do you add to an existing conversation? I don't know. I think it's probably the second thing I mentioned. Then here's my profile picture with this green dot. That's pretty common pattern. But then you see this mic. It's basically unmute. Wants to use your microphone. We're kind of using the microphone right now. Sorry. Pop up. I'm not even gonna dive into this. Then there's this headphone. Deafen. Whew. Deafen. That's. Why would you call it deafen? I mean, turn off sound, maybe? But deafen, we call that ableist language. Somebody that's actually deaf could be insulted by this. I can imagine it really easily. There's no need to color label this. I'm just going to make an issue for that because we have a lot of technical issues, maybe design issues, but this is content. Yeah, headphones for sound, for example. Disable headphones. I mean, disable and enable headphones. It's not that complicated to find something else, something better than deafen. The icon that enables and disables sound for headphones is called deafen. This could be. I'm not deaf, so I don't know. I'm just gonna say this could be considered ableist language. I'm not a specialist in this. It's not a big thing in the Netherlands, but I know that people could be insulted. So yeah, it's really insensitive. This could be considered ableist language. I'm not even sure if I'm spelling it right. Yeah, see, there needs to be an E in there. That's how often I type words like this in English. Never. An actual deaf person could be insulted by this. Again, I'm keeping this pretty open-ended. What Discord is going to do with it, I don't know. I'm just pointing out the fires that they can put out. Oh, and there I see in the chat, it's indeed very ableist. I'm not deaf, but I find it insensitive. Yeah, that's my reaction as well. Basically, I get this impression that this is not something you want to do. I'm not even insulted by it personally, but I'm just shocked to find it. It's yeah, I don't know. Let's see how Discord handles it. I'm just gonna prepare issue 12 because we're probably gonna have an issue 12. And there's the next one. It's a cogwheel with user settings. Also something that really stands out for me. That's more of a UX thing than an actual accessibility thing. But where are my menu items? Will you follow up with the response from Discord? I hope to get a response, and yes, I will share it, most certainly. Yeah, I'm very curious to hear what they're going to do, what they're going to say. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to share it on Twitter at least. I don't know if it's something we can stream, if it's interesting enough. But yeah, let's find out. Like doing the audit is only half the work, right? But yeah, I was about to say something that really stands out for me as well is that the user interface is all over the place. Like I have this area in the left top. There are 4 quite important links, and this friends thing, does it do something? Oh, it doesn't do anything because I don't have friends probably. Okay, and this thing that we clicked before with, oh, go away. So there's this left top area where there's all these controls, then it flows to the top where there's even more controls. I must say they are all very nice, large and clickable, but they're all over the place. Then I go further to the right. Then I have new group DM. Oh, that's behind my portrait, I think. I'm just gonna change the stream layout a little bit. That's gonna help. So to the right, there's new group DM. There is inbox and help and some close thing, I think, for the message. And there's a download button more to the center. And then to the left bottom, there's this user thing that I can click. So basically, the user interface is all over the place. I'm not going to mark this as an issue, but if I had any say in the UX of this whole thing, this would be something I would talk about. I would not be satisfied with this. Not satisfied at all. So where do we go next? There's so much to see, so much to do. Is it a trend to have the UI all over the place? I see this more often. I got a question before. How long are you, what was the question again? How long are you active in accessibility, basically? I've been doing this for about 4 years. I think this is of all ages. I think this was an issue as well when people still made their pages in front page or Dreamweaver or whatever software you want to use. My experience is that it is a consideration for a UXer to put the buttons where they're useful and to make it minimalist. So is it a trend to have the UI all over the place? I don't think so. I think it's of all ages, and a lot of UX designers do this. It's just not always in the nature of people to simplify things. And everybody wants to be on the front page. Somebody's going to say, hey, the user profile, it's very important. Let's have a section for that. And somebody else says, yeah, but we need a help button. Help is like the most important thing there is. Yeah, they might be right. I don't know. But somebody else should think about that. That's information architecture, I think. And I think that's an issue of all ages. That's my experience, at least. If it is a trend, please stop it. But I'm not the one to stop it, I think. So to me, it looks It also looks a bit like it's been made from separate components by separate teams without getting a more total view. Yeah, that's a big possibility as well. A lot of companies, I think I can show Spotify, for example. At ING, we also work with the Spotify model. That's what they call it. This is Spotify that you see right now. Spotify, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. See that? Can I zoom in? Yeah, I can zoom in. It's a web app in the end. Oh, it also disappears. Spotify is a bit famous because they work with a certain model that every feature belongs to a certain team. So it could be we have this sidebar to the right that's about friends, and it could be there's one team responsible for this part, and they have nothing to do with the part in the middle. They have nothing to do with the bar in the top. They just do this. And then there's this profile menu in the top right. It could be that one team is responsible for this, and they just do the profile menu and nothing more. It could be, I don't know. You say ING has the UI all over the place. Yeah, it could be. There are parts where this is the case. We started out really minimal, and I think most companies start out really minimal because you have a small amount of features to start with. But if you look at something like Spotify, you have so many features, and they all want attention. So it's the old debate that everybody wants to be on the front page. You've got this piece. This is a team working on this, a team working on this, a team working on this, a team working. There needs to be somebody that keeps track of all these things and makes a design for the whole thing. And these days, a lot of companies work with design systems also, and being responsible for features. So I can imagine it's really easy to just keep busy with the small part that is yours and it belongs to your team. And don't focus on the rest of the app. Nobody feels the need to take control of the overall design. So yeah, I can imagine separate components by separate teams without getting more of a total view. Nobody feels the responsibility to do that. So I'm having a very empty interface. I'm just gonna go to my tweets because I had an invite code. No, I don't want to log in. I had an invite code for the accessibility team Discord, and I'm just gonna join that channel just to see how it looks, how it works. This is my stream. Do I really tweet that much? Apparently. Hey, did I share the link? Okay, I'm just gonna do the thing. I think I shared the link somewhere. Okay, but it also said we have public servers, so we're just gonna see, okay, these are public servers. I just clicked the button, geez, everything changes. Okay, so we get this new menu on the left. We get another search field here that immediately takes the focus, which is also an issue. Because you should not touch the focus of the user, and we get this search field and we get these servers. So I'm just gonna say, hey, the Animal Crossing server. I play Animal Crossing. I know what these people talk about, at least a bit of it. There are almost 500,000 members. I don't think they will mind if somebody called John Test or Test John joins them. I'm gonna click this one. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you join a new server. And again, this looks much like the other modals that we've seen before. It has an X button. It has these sort of buttons that make you do things. Please read the rules first. Please read channel descriptions. Grab yourself a color. Grab yourself a color. They are rich, having so many colors. Keep up to date of the latest. I'll just look around for now. This is a link or something. Is this a link? I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna check this thing, but because I like not doing anything, so I'm just gonna call my inspector. I'm just gonna inspect this element. It says I'll just look around for now. It's just gray text. When you look at it, it's gray text. It doesn't stand out. It could be a paragraph or something, but when I look in the code, it's actually a button. Who would have thought? So that's interesting. So what happens if I just select the text here, I do tab. Yeah. So let's try this again with Nvda, because at least we hear something then. Yeah, the text lit up a bit. Yeah, that's the right way of saying it, a bit, because that's about all you see. And it's only when you hover it. So you already have the intention to see what it is, and then you find out what it is. Talking about trends, I did make websites a long time ago, and one of the trends that we used to have, I remember it very well, sadly, is you always had these things that you needed to hover. I don't know if I'm the only one remembering that, but you had these menu items, and only if you hover it, you see what it is. And you have these images, and only if you see, if you hover it, you see what it is. Focus for actual knowledge. And I saw this a lot on portfolio websites and stuff, and it was like the most unusable thing. Maybe that was the point that I started thinking about accessibility. And indeed, the link is shared in the chat for the channel that I meant, but I think this is gonna work, so we're just gonna keep it like this.
Discuss. Welcome to Discord partner Animal Crossing.
So.
Button graphic.
Button graphic. We're somewhere.
Nucling flag graphic. Please read the rules first.
Please read the rules first.
Number rules you must read button.
Number rules you must read button. Okay, so that's the first button. That's where the focus is right now. Tab.
Disable wave graphic. Please read channel descriptions. Number server info button.
Okay, so it first reads the image some way, and then it says please read channel descriptions and server info. So it sees these buttons as buttons, and it takes the content of the button for the name.
Islander fruit graphic. Grab yourself a color. Number passport rolls button.
Islander fruit graphic. Grab yourself a color. Islander fruit. So that's what this image is called. Islander fruit.
Mailbox graphic. Keep up to date on all the latest news.
Then we have the mailbox graphic. And then the last one is
think graphic. Ask questions when needing help.
Villager Think.
Number questions and game help button.
Ask questions when needing help. Oh, great names. And then comes the last one, I hope.
I'll just look around for now button.
I'll just look around for now button. It didn't light up. It didn't do anything. So I think what we can assume a bit is this website has not been made for keyboard accessibility at all. It's not been made for users that use the keyboard.
Villager Think graphic. Ask questions when
going back.
Help. No, I'll just look around for now button.
I'll just look around for now button. I'm gonna press enter, see if that works.
Number server info.
It works.
Surface Sidebar navigation landmark clickable graphic visited link home. Clickable graphic link Animal Crossing. New Horizons. Clickable graphic button add a server. Clickable graphic button explore public servers. Clickable graphic button download.
Okay, it's gonna read the entire page. So yeah, this is.
Go get a color.
Why is this blue outline here? Can we go without?
No, general.
Oh, that's probably the inspector. I'm just gonna see if that.
Container dub /d. Share your own.
Okay, so now we have the actual interface of Discord. This is what it looks like if you're in a channel, and the way Discord works, it's basically in the least respectful way, I guess. It's a chat box. I'm now in a chat box. Nothing new about that. It's a chat box. It looks a lot like Slack in that way, but the interface, and we come back to this again, it's all over the place. So we have these buttons to the left. We have these. I'm just gonna disable. Disabling Nvda again, just to keep things quiet. So to the left, we have the same menu buttons. They still keep the same function, but you have this new one called Animal Crossing New Horizons. So this is the server that we are on. Then we have these channels, which have an update, the summer update image. There's going to be an update, and it has this button as well, leave server. This is also really weird. You see this bit of text that's truncated with these dots. You expect, or at least I expect when clicking this, that, and yeah, it looks like Slack. Yeah. When I click this link, I think this is going to expand somehow. I'm going to read the rest of this text, but no. It just opens a pop-up, leave server. Let's not do that. We're just getting started. Then we get all these channels. There's an animation. This animation cannot be stopped. It's continuing. Very distracting. Can I click it? Oh, I can click it. And then I get a pop-up. I'm going to assume that you don't want to use the keyboard for these things. Just from what I've seen so far. And we get 2 pop-ups even. So we get the Make Plans channel demo. And then we go... Can I even read what's behind it? Or is it part of this pop-up? I'm not sure. This looks like a separate UI element. These are your channels. Channels are places in your server where people can talk about different topics. Got it. Oh, and now it turns into an exclamation mark. Much better. So it animates even more. So you've got these channels on the left. You can scroll in them. So that's a part of the interface. Some are thick and white. Others are gray and dark. I'm really curious to see how the color contrast is doing for that. And this is probably the automated dark theme. So maybe the light theme is better for contrast, but I don't know. This is just how I opened the page. And yeah, the quiet channels here, they have a contrast ratio of 3.2 to 1, which is really, really bad and really, really dark. So if you have any vision issues, you might have a problem seeing what it even says. You hover them, you get new invite to server. Wow, there's so much happening here. You can open and close this. You can right click it. You can go to, you have channels that are grouped. So there's a lot of interface on the left side, and there's even the voice channels. I'm not going to even talk about how voice communication is accessible or how it's not. I mean, there has been a lot of discussion about that, what's recently happening at Twitter and their voice messages, but let's focus on the interface. It's here. Then you've got the actual chat box in the center. You've got your chat field at the bottom where I should verify my phone. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's also really interesting to see that there's stuff happening there as well. And then at the top there's a new bar, and there's a bar below it also with a link. And then to the right, basically everything is interface. I guess that's the conclusion, right? Basically everything is interface. There is some text here and there, but you have to click. You basically have to find the text. That's not an accessibility issue, but it's really noticeable. It kind of speaks to what we mentioned before, like probably nobody is taking responsibility for the whole thing. It's not streamlined in any way. It's just all over the place. So what can we do? What can we do with this? I'm just going to see if I can open this in my Firefox browser now, where I have a few more extensions. I think I can enter the password. If you have a moment. Oh, that really makes me consider what was the password again. We just made this account and I think I've already lost it. So I have my my information on another screen right now, and I think I've already lost the password. That's great. So I'm not gonna log in with Firefox. Not gonna log in with Firefox at all. I was what I was really curious about is, are there any landmarks defined? If you start on a page like this, it's really overwhelming. What you can do in your code is you can have landmarks. Landmarks are basically ways of navigating a page. I'm going to go back to the WebAIM screen reader survey. I'm just going to go scroll to the top here. So I have this table of contents with all these questions for screen reader users. And they have a question about navigation. Where is it? Landmarks and regions. So I'm just going to share this link again because it's still good. Landmarks and regions. So the question is, how often do you navigate by landmarks and regions in your screen reader? Because it's a way to navigate. And there's a question before it. I think it's here. What most screen reader users do, at least according to the survey, is they use headings. Because if you have a normal page with normal content and not the abnormal page like Discord, you have these headings. And these headings form a structure within the page. And you can navigate from one heading to another. And that's basically how people visually read a newspaper as well. You scan the headings. You visually go through all these headings and you come up with one subject after another. And you say, hey, sufficient techniques, that's what I was looking for. So I'm going to read what's under this heading, because there's a sort of hierarchy. What's under a heading belongs to the heading. That's the main source of navigation for a lot of people. But there's another way to do things, that's landmarks and regions. So I'm going to assume, I can open this one in Firefox. That's just for demo purposes. I'm going to bring Firefox back into the screen. I'm going to open a new tab, open the link we have. This is an example of WakeHack. And I'm opening a specific extension that I have that shows the landmarks. And it says this page has 2 navigation landmarks and a main landmark. And I'm going to say show all landmarks. Yeah, and now I see if I'm going to highlight them. Wow, with pretty purple, pink. Pink? I guess it's pink. My daughter calls everything pink, but this is certainly pink. So these are the landmarks on this page. There's a navigation landmark. Yeah, this is how you navigate. Either in this page, you navigate between pages with this part. It's a bit like a breadcrumb sort of thing. And there's another navigation landmark here, which is more like a table of contents, just we had on the page earlier. And then there's the main landmark. This is the landmark for the main content. And that's here. And it's really, I'm going to scroll down a bit. This really big block is all in that landmark. So you could use your screen reader and say, hey, I want to navigate to the main landmark, and you would go to this content right here. So that's what I was really hoping to look at in Discord as well. So now we're back at Discord. I would expect the chat. The chat is the main content of the page. I would expect it to be in a landmark. So I'm just going to load the code. I cannot right click because they've blocked that. I'm just going to see, this is really big. I'm just going to navigate the code a little bit. Yeah, there we have it. So I'm just going to drag this out of the screen. And you can see that they have a main landmark. That's the one I'm highlighting right now. That's the chat box. So that's good. And I can see in the code that the landmark is also called server info. And then within parentheses, it says channel. I'm not sure if that's a great description. Server info. I would expect server info to say something about the server, but this is a pretty good landmark. And then I'm gonna see if they have any more. I'm sorry for all the flashing content. They have a navigation landmark. Yeah, this one. Surface Sidebar. So the sidebar to the left, where they had these icons that we did not get, it's called the Surface Sidebar. You can see here they use the nav element, NAV, navigation. And it has an ARIA label, so it has a name, and the name is Surface Sidebar. So you could say this sidebar is named more clearly for people who cannot see than for people who can see. Because the screen reader, for example, would announce this, and the extension that we had before would also announce this. And it's called the Surface Sidebar. I would have liked to know that. So we have a Surface Sidebar and a main. So what do we have? There's also the channel header, which is a section and not an actual semantic element. I'm just going to scroll to the code here. This is the head body. I think that's about it. So they have a main and a navigation. Maybe something further down. They should often be pretty top level. I'm not going to read the entire code, but so they have some landmarks, and then we're going to see headings. So visually there are some things that stand out. For example, I see here Animal Crossing. This looks like a heading. This looks like something I would like to... Oh, then we get the... No right clicking again. So I'm going to grab the inspector. I'm going to go to this thing. It's even a header. I'm not going to talk about that part. But it's a div. It's an H1. Okay. So basically, H1 means this is the top level heading. They are saying this is the most important name on the entire page. This is basically the name of the page. And it says Animal Crossing New Horizon. I can imagine that's a good name for this one. This is the server we are on. A good practice would be, though, to also make this the name of the page, but the name of the page is hashtag server info. So they are not the same thing. What we do see, hashtag server info, hey, that's this. That's an H3. Or is it an H3? No, it's not actually an H3 because it has a role button. So if you would look at the semantics, oh, this is let's go back. Let's not make it too complicated right away, because that was happening here as well, I think. Yeah, this is okay. This is a great example. A little bit of HTML class, I guess. You have a H1, which has its own semantics. So let's say you use existing technology, or you use Pocket to read a page or something. They will know, hey, that's an H1. That's not normal text. That's a heading. That's really special. And the heading is inside of a header. A header is also special. It has a semantic value. But all of these things are in a div with the role button. And what is really interesting about a button is that it will override any semantics of the elements in there. So all the semantics that you put in there, you say, hey, I have this nice H1. I did my best to give this some value. It's gone. It's gone because it's inside a button. I think I can show this in Y-area as well. So there's a page that has the specifications for Y-area. Is this the 1.2? I think so. So the bit of code that you saw, role is button, that's aria. That's adding semantics when there is none. And I'm just going to do this the easy way. I'm going to search. And it's not going to find it right away. So I'm just going to scroll to the page a bit because there's so much content on this page and it's sometimes hard to find what you want. I'm going to zoom out a bit because then maybe I can see the menu. Y-area roles. Don't know why it's all so slow, but hey. I'm just going to scroll through this page a bit. I'm going to the bit that says button. There, button, name required. So I'm going to close the search again and zoom in again. So we saw this div element had an attribute, and it was role, and the value was button. That makes the semantics of the div equal to that of a button. But about the button. There's all these specifications that are specified here. You can read them for yourself. I'm going to share them in the chat as well. It has a lot of information that's really valuable, but I'm going to scroll to the end because there's an important part. This is the part of the table that's interesting to us right now. It says children presentational, true. So in this one line, it says, if you ever add the role is button, like they just did, all the children of this element will become presentational. So somebody did their best, and I can get the inspector again, and said, hey, I'm going to add an H1 and a header. Somebody said, I'm not going to use a div or a span. I'm going to use something with semantic value. But because they used it inside a button, all this semantic value is gone. So it could well be that even though this page has an H1, it doesn't actually function like an H1 because the semantic value is gone. It's presentational. This could have been a div or a span. If I get a plugin or something that shows me all the headings, it will probably not mention this H1. And the same thing happens also for this one. It's an H3. I don't know if that's a logical choice. This one is even more interesting. It's an H3, but it has the role button. So it's not an H3, it's a button. If you look at the semantics of this page, it will be seen as a button and not an H3. It's not going to do anything. And then directly above the button is also a button. Is it inside? Yeah, it's inside this one, right? Yeah. So we have this div button again. There's so much interesting things to say. There's so much handiwork in here. But this div is turned into a button because it has the role button, and it also has an aria label, text channel, but it has a tab index that we mentioned before, and it's -1. So even though it is a button, and buttons should be accessible by keyboard and by mouse, and any way you want to approach it, it should be possible. This one is -1, so it's only approachable with JavaScript. You can put the focus on it with JavaScript, maybe even trigger it, but it's not focusable with keyboard. And putting a button inside a button, an interactive element inside an interactive element, I don't even know how you're supposed to approach this button. It's because it's inside an interactive element in theory. So how would a browser even handle it? And how would you even approach this button? Because it does not have a tab index. It just has the roll button. So even though semantically it's a button, there's nothing you can do with it probably. Maybe you can click it because JavaScript can do anything, but with a tab you cannot. There is this other div that does have a roll button and a tab index of 0, but it's technically not a button because it's inside another button. So the semantics, this roll button, is removed. So I'm just gonna capture my thoughts about these. I'm gonna write my last issue because there's so much happening on this page and there's so many things that I can write, but I'm gonna make things easy for the people of Discord and both for myself. Many elements on the page use the role attribute with a value semanticception. Yeah, that's a bit like, except it isn't. It's like inception of semantics, but it's also not, because only the top element will get semantic value. So it's really, why would you do such a thing? So many elements on the page use the role attribute with the value of button. This turns elements into buttons, at least semantically. It is important to know that anything inside such a element is stripped of any semantic value. A button inside a button could just as well have been a span or a div with no semantic value. Besides that, it is much easier to use actual to use an actual button, as it usually results in less accessibility issues and less work for the team building it. So basically what I say here, watch out with putting stuff in buttons, and if you really do need a button, use an actual button. I'm gonna take all these issues, almost remove them. We have 12 issues so far. On D page, that's not clear. See, I'm getting more tired. Many elements on pages. I mean, it's all over the place. We saw it before as well. So this is going to be the last issue for now. I'm just going to be a real streamer now and say, if you can follow this channel, please do. That means you get a notification next time I'm online. I'm going to submit these things into the form. We already have it open in Firefox. So we have this Discord feedback form. Where is it? Here. And this is going to be my answer. See, it's not even meant for such a long answer. It just wants a one-line answer. I'm going to send this. And if I get any feedback, I'm going to share it either on stream, but certainly on Twitter. And I really hope that this feedback form and the fact that Discord has somebody to work on accessibility is going to result into something. I'm just going to send this in. If there's any feedback, I'm going to let you know. But for now, I hope I've said something useful, and I want to thank you all very much for watching. If there are any questions, maybe I can still answer them. I don't know if there are. We've handled so many topics, and I feel like we went all over the place, but basically Discord goes all over the place. I see a big thanks. That's very much appreciated. I enjoy doing this. Thanks for the stream and the insights. Well, yeah, again, thank you very much. I hope to have a guest again next week. But for now, I think this is it. Any questions, feel free to ask me on Twitter as well. I should be always approachable with open DMs and everything because I just want to share things. So thanks a lot. Good luck. And this is the end of the stream for now. Thank you.